So my favorite betting strategy is Betfair trading. Why? Because it gives you the ability to profit on a horse race regardless of who goes on to win. And you don't have to do complicated things like looking at form and so on. In fact, there are some trades that you can do that are very easy. In fact, it's so easy that in this video, you're going to do the trade for me. I'll set it up and you tell me what I would have done, and we'll see if we agree on how this trade could have been performed. But we're going to show you a trade that makes over £500, and you will know exactly what to do. Let's explore that in this video. If you're interested in learning to trade on Betfair, then visit the BetAngel Academy, where you have detailed, structured Betfair trading courses. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon if you want notification of new videos as they're released. So if you've never done a Betfair trade before and you're coming at this from a horse racing betting perspective or something like that, let me just take a few seconds to describe exactly what your objective is. If you see odds that you think are too high and you expect the price to shorten as people become aware that in fact this horse is a good thing, then you would back at a higher price, lay at a lower price. That would generate a profit which you can then spread across the rest of the horses. If you think that the price is going to drift, if you think this horse has no chance, or the market's got it completely wrong and it should be at a much higher price, then you can lay at a lower price, back at a higher price, and again hedge the profit across the entire card. And the benefit of doing that is that you make profit before the race has started, and then when you hedge it, you make a profit regardless of who goes on to win. And that is the beauty of trading. When I first looked at horse racing, I knew very little about it. I know a lot more about it now. But I decided that the best way for me to make money from horse racing was to do that. I traded the sports market like you would trade the stock market. If I thought the price was too big or too small, I would basically trade that trend and then hedge my profit at the end of that particular period. And you can do that too. And in fact, on this video, you're going to tell me what you would have done, and you are going to absolutely agree with me and get it right. And I'll show you on this particular example how simple that process can be, how it can actually work out, and how there's a logical sequence with everything that happens. So for this particular trade, what we're going to do is we're going to look at Royal Ascot 2019. And there are two key protagonists in this particular story. One of them, excuse me mum, is the Queen. And the other one is good old Frankie Dettori. Now, Royal Ascot is run on the Queen's garden, effectively. She owns Ascot. And as a consequence, the royal family has an affinity with horse racing, and we always welcome that affinity, especially if you're within the industry. It's great to see all the pomp and ceremony that goes behind that, and it makes for a fantastic social event June every year. And as a consequence, there's a lot of interest in the meeting. There's a lot of interest in horse racing. You generally get huge attendances there. And as a consequence, there's a lot of money bet into these particular horse racing markets. Now, you can trade every market, but some horse racing meetings are very small, but something like Royal Ascot is absolutely huge. In terms of matched betting turnover that occurs on the Betfair exchange, you typically find there are around 50 to 70 million pound matched each year at Royal Ascot. It is absolutely massive, and that works out in millions per race. Some races are bigger than others and so on, but you can see the extent of the market there. And that's part of the opportunity, the occasion, the royal family, the activity within the market, all of the people in attendance. It generates the sort of conditions that are ideal for what we want to try and do. But we also have to thank Frankie Dettori, because Frankie Dettori is very well known. If you go out into the street, you will find, if you say to somebody, can you name me a famous jockey? They'll probably say Frankie Dettori. But, they may say a few others, but he's very high profile. Whether you like him or you don't, he is a front man for racing. And as a consequence, you get a lot of that sort of interest generated within the market when you get something that's high profile going on. It could be a particular horse, or it could be a particular jockey. But if you get a decent horse, a decent jockey at a decent event, then you're obviously going to get a lot of interest within that particular market. So yeah, those are the two key protagonists within this particular set of events. Now, on this particular day, Frankie Dettori had a number of rides booked. And in the first race, the horse that he was riding was called Al Ali, or A Ali, I think. Is that correct? If I'm wrong, then I apologise. But yeah, it was a fairly sort of nondescript first race, fairly competitive race, and his horse went off at odds of about 6 or thereabouts. And you know, anything could have happened in that first race, but nonetheless, Frankie Dettori won that first race. So good on you, Frankie. But really, in terms of betting activity within the market, not a great deal happened there. First race of the day, anything could happen. People are still trying to work out what they think could be a trend for that particular day. Is it a certain trainer, a jockey, horses that like good ground, soft ground, firm ground? You know, there's a mixture of different things there, but there's not really many clues that you can get from the very first race. I never tend to do particularly well on the first race for that precise reason. So anyway, second race of the day, we come up to Dettori's next mount called Sangarius. Similar story, competitive race, quite big odds. He was available at odds of 7. But as a consequence, you know, you wouldn't necessarily expect Frankie Dettori to pull off what they would call a two-timer. If you have 2 horses priced at 2 and you bet on both of them and then accumulate, you'd get odds of 49 to 1. It would be quite big. And this is the relevant point here because, of course, one of the things that Frankie Dettori is famous for is he actually managed to ride a winner on every race at the card at Ascot. It wasn't at Royal Ascot, but nonetheless, it was a meeting at Ascot. And that is incredibly rare. Can you imagine if you've got horses priced at a variety of odds and then you raise it to the power of 7? That's a massive number. And it was such an incredible event that a number of bookmakers did go bust simply because they didn't believe it was possible for somebody to win 7 races in a row. But he did. So on this particular day at Royal Ascot, he's just won the first 2 races. So I've got a question for you. He was riding Starcatcher in the next race. Again, it was quite a competitive race. Starcatcher was around odds of 7 to 8. But Frankie Dettori had just won the first 2 races. Now, can you imagine all of those people out there getting drunk, having a good time, all of those sort of things? What are they going to do? They're looking down the card, they're thinking, oh, who shall I have a bet on in the next race? Or what happened in the first 2 races? Oh, Frankie Dettori won. I wonder if... And there we go. So yes, money did come for Starcatcher. But, you know, it was at quite large odds. So you wouldn't necessarily expect that he would land 3 races at fairly large odds. Because again, we would do 49 to the power of 7. It's a big number. So if you could back all the first 3 in the race on Frankie Dettori, you would have made an awful lot of money. Anyhow, race starts. Frankie does a good job. Starcatcher romps home. So what do you think happened in race 4? All of a sudden, Frankie Dettori has won the first 3 races. Could he win a 4th? Now, the interesting thing about this is when the market really set itself on fire. When we look at Starcatcher, there was a fair amount of backing activity on Starcatcher on this particular occasion. But the next horse that he was riding in the feature race of the day, or one of the highest profile races of the day, was a horse called Stradivarius that was available at relatively short odds. So of course, at that particular moment, everybody piled in to Stradivarius. So you can imagine the odds on Stradivarius are up here. In the first race, they moved in a little bit. Second race, they moved in. Third race, you're sort of thinking, well, maybe it's Frankie's day. And when that winner came in on that third race, the money really slammed down on Stradivarius. But that isn't our trade. We're going to talk about this in a second. So what happened to Stradivarius on that 4th race of the day? Frankie won again. So let me now phrase the situation that we find ourselves in. Frankie Dettori has won the first 4 races of the day. The first 3 were at quite large odds. The favourite in the 4th race was his, which he romped home on. What do you think happened in the 5th race? He was riding a horse called Turgenev there. And when we go back to the start of this particular video, you can actually look at the scenario where I was saying if you back at a high price and you expect the odds to come in other words, get shorter, you know, if people are interested in that horse, the odds will get shorter. So what do you think happened to Turgenev? We've got 4 runners that Frankie Dettori has landed. He's running Turgenev in the next race. Do you think that the odds got shorter and shorter as people put more money on him? Or do you think the odds shot off into the distance on the basis that he just won the previous 4 races? What would you have done? Would you have backed or would you have laid? If you backed, you're expecting the prices to get shorter. If you lay, you're expecting the prices to get bigger. What would you have done on Turgenev? Now, of course, what actually happened with Turgenev is as Stradivarius was pretty much crossing the line, everybody plunged in on Turgenev. It was available at odds of 15. When the activity started within the market, it moved quickly into odds of 12. And then we saw the odds move down to 7.5. So even if you would have missed that first opportunity, you would have had another one and another one and another one. And the remarkable thing about this is the whole market was completely on fire at this particular moment in time. And it actually got all the way down to 4.5. So it was available at odds 15, got all the way down to 4.5. And if you want to see just how manic this market was, then at the peak of the absolute mayhem that this market was, there was nearly £250,000 trying to back Turgenev at 4.5. Purely on the basis that Frankie Dettori had won the previous 4 races and he was looking for a 5th. So race starts and Frankie Dettori does not pull it off. And it was quite revealing because in an interview at the end of that particular race, he was sort of saying that he had got excited. He said that, it had all got to him. And it's interesting to hear that even at the highest level of a sport, sportsmen still have a little bit of performance anxiety. So he basically went for the line too quickly on Turgenev. Turgenev ran out of steam and he was overtaken as it came to the line. But of course, it didn't matter to us because we'd backed Turgenev at a much higher price. We traded out as the price came in much lower. And we had made a huge amount of money even before the race had started. And in fact, you would have done as well if you would have followed exactly the same thing that we've just been talking about. But if you look at my image of the race itself, you can see that all of this money was made before the race had even started. I almost feel disappointed that I didn't make more because it was so obvious. And perhaps I just got a little bit overambitious at some points within this particular trade. But nonetheless, you could have used any amount of money and followed exactly the same trade as me, just by following that sequence of events. But you could also, one of the interesting things about this is if you go onto the forum during a major meeting, you'll see and hear us chatting to each other within there, and you'll actually see all of these things developing real time. So if you're slightly cautious or you're not sure exactly what you're looking for, very often you will find it in the forum as you see all of the individual traders chatting amongst themselves. So that makes for an interesting scenario. So, and if you need a little bit of guidance or a little bit of support, you can just sit there and watch us and see what we're talking about, and that will give you a steer on things in general. So of course now, there is a little bit of a sort of sting in the tail here because Turgenev lost. Everybody's expecting Frankie Dettori to get another winner. So when Turgenev lost, what do you think happened to the last horse that he was running on that particular day? It was a horse called Questionnaire. And as the gambles built up on all of the other previous horses, the price on Questionnaire came crashing in. So what do you think happened when Turgenev lost? Of course, the price went shooting back out in the other direction. So on this particular day, we were treated to a scenario where we managed to see both sides of the coin in action, and they were quite extreme as well. So the great thing about this was that we actually managed to catch a bit of price action in both directions. In one race, we would have profited because the price came bombing in, and on the next race, we could have profited because the price went bombing out. And sometimes trading is that simple. It doesn't require anything more complicated other than just your eyes and watching what's going on within the screen. Now, one of the questions that you have, you undoubtedly have, is, how often does this happen? Because it's not guaranteed to happen all of the time because you need that sequence of events to occur. But you do find this occurring on a number of occasions at small meetings and at large meetings. And in fact, I have covered this in other videos, and there was an instance where this occurred before at Royal Ascot, but it has occurred at other major race meetings as well. And what I'll do for you is I'll put those videos on the end screen at the end of this one, so you can actually watch how these scenarios play out. One thing you can't predict is, will it happen at Royal Ascot this year? I don't know. We need to see what happens on the actual race day itself, what the conditions are like, who's riding what, and whether they actually manage to build up a little sequence of wins. But nonetheless, sometimes trading can be positioned as being very complicated and sometimes counterintuitive and so on. But very often you'll find trades that just are really simple. And as long as you're prepared to be in the right place and you're prepared to put your money down when you see these sort of things occurring, the strategy can be actually quite simple. You know, a situation is developing where we're expecting the money to come, so we'll just back it and trade out at a lower price and hedge the position from there. It requires nothing more than you just having watched Royal Ascot on this particular day in 2019. It's not that complicated, anybody can do it. You just need to pay attention and be there when the opportunity strikes. But if you're interested in trying to find a really simple Betfair trade that doesn't require that much thought process or anything particularly complicated, there it is. And hopefully, as I discussed it within this particular video, you managed to find that trade too, because once you understand the sequence of events, the way that you would profit from that seems pretty obvious. So yeah, I hope that video was useful for you, and I hope that we see this again at Royal Ascot this year.